Well, Kira, welcome to the Lessons of the Lashpreneur show, my dear. Long time coming.
I know. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So tell the listeners where you're from, where you live, who you serve, how you help people.
Yeah. Well, I physically live in San Diego area. So Tara and I were just talking a little bit about how we've been like kind of crossing over, but just missing each other for years and years.
Yep.
But we serve all 50 states. So HR is what we do. We specialize in service-based businesses, primarily female founders, because honestly, who needs a man? Just kidding. We have some gays in there. But realistically, it's just a little bit different to lead a team coming from the feminine gaze.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we do is help people to kind of, I call myself anti-HR because my corporate trauma that helped me create this business was because I didn't really think I could trust going to HR.
Yeah.
So starting out my career in operations and then accidentally becoming the HR person over the years is what sort of drove my goal, which is to help female founders actually be able to build profitable, sustainable businesses and teams so that we can be in control of our own destiny and just really have a seat at the table. And I think the way that we do that is by showing up as authentic leaders, being truly ourselves, not being afraid to cry at work if we have to, not
Hmm.
shaming each other, lifting each other up, and essentially just making it so that we can last a long time in whatever business that we choose. So we've worked with some beauty professionals, but we really do span all 50 states for any female founded business. And usually it's under 50 employees.
Love it. Oh my God, I cannot resonate with that more. Love it. All right. So let's talk about what is it that you've seen are the most common struggles that people, when they're building out a team or they're trying to create team culture, what are kind of the main problems people come to you for going like, help?
Yeah, well, I think that one of the things is that people don't know that we exist and that you don't have to white knuckle your way through team
Mm,
issues. I think that we have this amazing problem where we realize, oh my gosh, I'm kicking ass at what I'm doing and now I need support. And so then you kind of get into this situation where you're like, well, great, I'll just bring somebody in. And then if they're in your program or if they're listening to the right people, they bring them in as an employee. And then they're like, oh no, this maybe didn't work out the way I wanted, or it's not always 100% great, or
yeah.
I have a lot of turnover, or I think I'm paying them too much, or why am I being treated like shit, or they become jaded, or sorry, I forgot to ask if I'm allowed to cuss on this.
Yeah,
Um,
go for it. Okay. Yeah.
um, but if you're kind of like, you could become jaded and then you think, oh, I have to only rely on myself. And that kind of
Yeah.
isolation kind of makes us not want to do it anymore. Relying on other people and being vulnerable in business is a really scary thing. And what we do is I'm all about like, go out, do it yourself the first time, make the mistakes that you don't know that you're making. And then we'll come in and ask the questions that you didn't know that you needed to ask. And that will
Wow.
help you to set up a really solid foundation, not only legally and ethically, but also culturally, which will kind of keep you off and running to really step into leadership as who you really are and not trying to fit into some box of some stupid book you read, because all
Yeah.
of those books are written by old white men. So unless you want to lead like them, then there's going to be some discrepancies, and I think we just need permission sometimes to know that we don't have to do that and we don't have to model things after the way that we've seen it done in the past.
I love that. Yeah, in our program, we have a training on creating mission, vision, and values. And it's so funny to hear. Sometimes members will put it through Chat GPT, and I'm like, no, 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 no. This is your business. It's personal brand kind of, but you're building out a team. And I can tell when they start to write it in super corporate-y. And I'm like, okay, read this to me as if you were talking to me right now. Take out the, hence and therefore, and, moving forward. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, yeah. So I love that it is more of a human brand, right?
Mhm.
Putting the human back in human resources. There's your tagline. There you go.
There it is. Put it on the website. And I love that you said that too, because I think that when I first started my business, I come from a corporate background and I had written my mission, vision, and values. And in my mastermind, I got kind of bullied about them because I didn't realize that I was talking like a textbook and talking like an
Mm,
HR document. And then I learned, especially through my copywriter, who I eventually convinced to be my employee. And now she's in-house and does all of our content writing. But she was like, no, just like do a voice memo. The way you talk is great. Who
yeah.
cares if something's spelled wrong or looks weird or doesn't seem professional? That's what you want to build this on, not some professional contractually written thing. There's a time and a place for legalese, and it's not usually in conversation.
Yeah.
So basically just
Or
like,
marketing.
yeah, be your own person and like talk normally. And I don't know, that was just a lesson that I had to learn. So I
For
feel like a
sure.
lot of other people think that we have to fit in this mold because that's what we were told was right. And it's not just for your mission, vision, values, but that seeps into the rest of your business. If you want your business to feel like a corporate stomping ground or another Amazon where people are peeing in bottles apparently while they're delivering packages, then sure, use the old man white
Do you?
terms. Yeah, but I don't think you want to if you're listening to this podcast. So here's your permission to not.
Permission granted from Kira. I love it. Yeah, it's I think, and you can kind of speak to this too, of what you're seeing, not just in our industry, but across the world. And especially with our industry, most people who are being hired are Gen Z. So they're a different kind of generation coming in, that the culture, can you talk about how essential building out a really positive, healthy team culture is, and even what you've seen as positive, healthy team cultures versus more toxic and high turnover and unsatisfied employees?
Yeah, for sure. I think that there is, at the root of it, everything in our society everywhere. This isn't a commentation on politics or anything, but we're kind of just taught that there's two sides. Everything's binary. And you're either for the employee or you're against the employee, or you're for the
Yeah.
company or you're for the employee, but you can't be both. But the reality is, especially in small business, we actually have the opportunity to be both. Things that are good for your company can be good for your employees, and things that are great for your employees and their futures can still be good for your company. And I think that we were kind of, that's why I say I'm anti HR, because when HR people are trained, they literally are told to protect the company first. But when people go into HR, they want to help the people. So we're coming in with this personality trait of like, I can't wait to help the other people that I work with. But then we're filtered through this lens of, but your job is to make sure that you have a job tomorrow by protecting this company.
Yeah.
And I just want to shatter that binary and say that it is possible for these things both to exist at the same time equally, and everybody moving forward in the same direction. Because when you say what's good for the company is good for the people, that is always true. So at the same time, what's good for your people can also be good for your company. And no matter what leader we work with, whether it's a one-on-one capacity, through our management training course, through our compliance program, our 90-day intensive, whatever, our membership, whatever it is we're doing, oftentimes we feel like we have to go back to that main mentality of like, I know this feels like it sucks, but it's actually great for your person. And that means your company is going to benefit from it. It's just that long-term goal that you have to keep in mind, which is why what you said about having your mission, vision, values driving everything is so important, because
Yeah.
everything can come back to that at the end of the day, but we can weed it like little teeny little things you can do throughout the culture of your business that are especially going to be sustainable, because you are likely a female founder that has a lot of dimensions to your personality, that
Mhm.
probably cares about your people, but that doesn't mean that you don't deserve boundaries and you don't deserve to be treated with respect, and your experience doesn't deserve to be centered. You're actually going to show up as a better leader for your people and help them create their better career paths if you're centering yourself first. So it's kind of that traditional thing of you can't really pour from an empty cup. An example
Have
I
we
use
heard
all the
that before
time.
on this podcast? Huh? Or put
Yeah,
the
well, there you
oxygen mask
go.
on yourself first. Like, yeah, it's
Yeah,
100%. You can't pour into others if you are coming from a place of scarcity, stress, financial, problems. Your business is a reflection of you as the owner. You can't blame it on anybody else. So if your team is unhappy, if you have constant turnover, if the financials are not there, you're not able to pay bills, you're going into debt, you're stuck in the treatment room, it's really hard to get your business to grow and to even become a well-oiled machine where it's not taking so much of your bandwidth if you're not full first, because then I call it codependency on your business. You are using your business to meet an emotional need. And as women, I don't know about you, but at least one week a month, I'm a little bit unstable on the emotional side of things, and my business feels like it's falling apart. But the
yeah.
data and the numbers share a very different story, right? So when we don't, feelings aren't facts. If you're basing your business off of feelings, it's going to be a roller coaster of a ride, and your team is going to experience that and even mirror that back to you way more because you're affecting them as well. So if you go into, let's say, disciplinary conversations, or you're afraid to, and they're combative or they're defensive, chances are you created that environment and that hostility in how you approached it, or by avoiding it and resenting them and letting it build up over time.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
And that's the same thing, back to the Gen Z thing, is that they are hyper aware of that mentality. They don't want to feel like a burden. Quite frankly, if you're telling them, about your problems, they might be like, that's kind of none of my business.
Yeah.
So realistically, when you're building these cultures, there is a line in the sand that you can't cross, but it's not the line that you think it is. People are always like, so what do we do? Like, do you hire your friends? No, I heard we never hire our friends. And it's like, we have some feelings about that, but I'll be honest, some people are more equipped to manage and hire people that they consider friends than others. So
Yeah.
it's less about knowing your friends and more about knowing yourself. And that same
Mhm.
thing comes from Gen Z. And I think that that's something that we want to encourage because it actually makes management a little bit easier because you get to decide where that line is. And culture is really about having your team feel empowered enough to help you decide where the line is. So they get to tell you what's acceptable for them, what motivates them, what drains them, and then you can move that line back and forth. It doesn't have to be black and white about every single topic. Some people, especially in the beauty business, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the people that go in the beauty business want to make other people feel good, which
Mhm.
means that they're intrinsically motivated to do a good job for your clients and probably for you. So you have a choice of whether you're going to take advantage of that or you're going to use that to help them funnel that into the experience that your clients are having, and then everybody grows from there. But if you're taking advantage of it as a supervisor, as a boss, as a leader, and you're sucking all that good stuff out of your people that are showing up in service to others, there's not going to be anything left for your clients. And so then it's like, well, who's really in charge of this place? Like
Right.
who's really driving the energy? Who's the bumpers on the bowling alley? We got to make sure that we're the bumpers, but we're not necessarily walking the ball down the row. That kind of a thing is where I think the Gen Zs really do thrive, is that
Yeah.
independence and trust, but also there has to be some guidance. Our job is to develop them into a career that they love. And every move that you make, even if you feel, I just had a conversation with somebody the other day that was like, I poured so much into my team and I feel so screwed over. And it's like,
Mhm.
I know that feeling, but just remember that even when you feel that way, providing all of that for them is actually helping to set a better standard for other people of what they're going to accept at work. So
Yeah.
when they look back on this experience, if you provided a great experience for them or you tried your best, they're going to demand that of their next boss, which means that work is going to get better for everybody over time. So we can use, I mean, I'm always like, let's use Gen Z as our little like infiltrating system to show people the power of HR because they will not stop talking. So we
Yeah.
might as well use it for our advantage.
And then they're going to share it online on TikTok.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting because I've seen that too, where it's like people get a little bit of PTSD from hiring, or if they have a really toxic team member or a big walkout. We get a lot of people in our mastermind who like go through a big walkout and then they realize they need help with restructuring their business, but they're afraid of that happening again. And I think I always look at processes as to what process created the result, even the undesirable ones. And when we look, we always start back at hiring process because you made the choices to put those people into the business. And so what can we learn from how we hired those people to not recreate it? Or is there gaps in that process that we just hired a friend, or we just hired somebody that reached out over Instagram, or they did amazing work and I didn't really think about, the integrity that they have, would they steal, would they not steal? And so it's always going back to hiring process, which you want to make sure that you're communicating mission, vision, and values and asking the right questions to see if that person aligns with that. And one thing that we quote in here that you probably resonate with is that A players don't work for B leaders. You want a stellar team member. Are you the leader who's going to be able to foster that person to thrive in that environment? Or are you going to be somebody that they're going to just feel burned out and overworked and taken advantage of? And they're like, especially in the beauty industry, there's such a juicy carrot to go into business for yourself. So as employers, that's what you're competing with, not other employers, right? Not even people who are paying different wages or higher wages or illegally hiring. It is the competition for them to go out on their own because they don't understand what it takes to run a business. All they look at is the opportunity. So to retain good employees, you need to be the best leader for them because they can't get a leader if they go out on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that that's a really good point because a lot of times when it comes to any industry where, and there's a few, but any industry where somebody's like, oh, I'm just going to go and provide this service in my kitchen or my garage or whatever the case may be, they're not necessarily going to see that there is an opportunity cost for all of that.
Yeah.
So it's not your job as a leader to tell them how hard your job is, but it is to make their job so easy that why would they leave? It's comfy. It's great. I get to do what I love. I get vacation time. I'm open to having conversations. I have a supportive person that I'm really rooting for. And it's not about, putting up these black and white legal barriers. HR is about understanding human behavior and management and making sure that we are showing up as leaders, but also making sure that we're compliant. But that's honestly none of our team's business. How we get from you have a person in the chair to I am closing the door at night is not necessarily the same path that they're anticipating. They might think they might do it better for themselves, whatever the case may be. And so culture can really drive that intrinsic motivation for them to show up not only for you, but also for your culture, but also just to be happy being there. And I
Yeah.
think that one of the ways that we can do that as leaders is by showing them that we're not expecting them to be married to us. We are a stop on their career journey, and we're here to enrich that and make that the best possible experience. When
Yeah.
you open the doors to like not having this black and white, you work for me or you don't, then that you end up having a lot more flexibility there, and just people don't leave. Like
Yeah.
it's true. Like people just don't leave because they're like, well, something isn't working out. I know I can go talk to Kira about it and maybe find a new way to add some fulfillment, or I really hate doing this part of my job. Like, is there any way that we can reduce that? And if we have stuff in our head that's black and white about what we're allowing our teams to do, then it doesn't actually encourage those open conversations that could keep someone on your team for another year. And highly specialized people, including lash artists, especially when they're trained within your culture and know your clients, can cost up to 400% their annual salary just to replace them.
Yeah.
So it's just good business to have an open line of communication within your team and within your company. And the more that you try to put up these black and white things, the less likely it is that people are going to take it and run with it and become an intrinsic part of that bubble that you're building. And the rules for one business might not be the same for the other. So it's really your responsibility to decide what you want that to look like so that you can drive the culture forward. And that is, like you said, driven by that mission, vision, and values, and consistently coming back to that and helping people really buy into it and have a voice in it,
Yeah.
making sure they understand that. And you can control it, especially, like you said, people have this PTSD thing. We all have those employees. There's definitely conversations when you're like, listen, like, what if your lash artist came to you and they're like, I love this job, but I don't like doing lashes. You'd be like, I understand it's hard, but that is something you have to do. So instead of saying like, what the hell is wrong with you? We might be like, okay, well, we can't take that away, but what can we add that might make you feel more fulfilled at the end of the day? Is
Yeah.
it that get to, I don't know, there's all kinds of stuff that happens I don't know, do spray tans 2 hours a day. Does that make it feel like you have more variety? Different people's personalities are going to require different things. And I think the mistake that I see people make is they'll say, okay, great. Well, this worked for this incredible employee that's been here for 2 years. They do 5 hours of lashes, 2 hours of spray tans. That's what we're going to do for everyone from now on.
Right.
No, you have a small team. You get to curate and create their experience. It's fun. You get to have fun with it, and you get to help really be a part of their career journey instead of limiting it. And Gen Z is really looking for places that are going to listen to what they're saying. And I think that the beauty industry has that benefit of having people that are showing up at their door that actually want to make people feel beautiful, and they want to chat with the girls all day, and they want to yap and listen to Giggly Squad or this podcast or whatever. And like, that is just like primed to have a killer culture that I would personally give up my life to work at sometimes.
Right? Somebody else make the decisions, but just enjoy the culture. And I
Yeah.
think if you haven't heard me talk about the Gen Z stuff before, because we do talk about it in some of our team building stuff, if you understand what they've been through, which, I'm an elder millennial, but millennials and Gen Xers don't quite fully understand, or they think that they're entitled, but they were born kind of early 2000s. So they experienced their parents losing their houses and the recession in 2008, Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, the pandemic. They have a very strong mistrust for corporations and the corporate world because of how ineffective that was in creating security for their family during their upbringing. So they tend to be more boisterous in voicing their opinions. They also tend to want more input on their role, their job, their pay, those kinds of things, because they want to feel some element of control over their environment and their work. And they want to feel satisfied in their job because they understand that it's going to take up a lot of their time, but they also want that flexibility, right? So offering things like PTO or those kinds of benefits would be really enticing to a Gen Zer, and it's also going to retain them for longer. What else have you noticed about, if you're talking about Gen Z, kind of what they prioritize or how they operate a little bit differently than maybe us older types?
Yeah, I'm an older millennial too, so totally relate to that. I think that part of it is just that openness, like just being able to have a real conversation with the person that's leading them, and to also understand that they can pick up on things and they can do their own research and they can look stuff up, and they're very intuitive about what it is that they're doing when they're getting information. They are going to be hustlers, but what we want to do is make sure as leaders we're redirecting that hustle into something that's really benefiting them and benefiting the company.
Yeah.
So helping them understand the why behind the what of the actions that you take, of the changes that you make, anything like that is going to be really, really important. So if you have a beauty business, if you have a lash business that has an established team, make sure that you're not like, oh, I got everybody hired, we're ready to go. Like, don't forget that leadership is an everyday thing. It's how you show up. It's how you take, your shitty fight with your husband this morning, you leave it in the car, and then you walk in the door with a smile on your face. The biggest lesson that I learned being a manager for the last 15 years is literally just say good morning when you walk in the door. Because if you have a strong personality, which you probably do if you're an entrepreneur or a leader, even if you didn't ask for it, people are looking to you for the way that they're going to feel and act at work. And if you walk in the door and you don't establish what it's supposed to feel like that day, especially in an in-person environment, people are going to draw their own conclusions. And one thing I will say about not just Gen Z, but anyone in the social media universe is that people are super quick to assign a diagnosis to somebody's bad mood. So within
He's a narcissist.
if you make somebody feel bad, exactly, that's the exact example I was thinking of. If you make somebody feel bad when maybe you shouldn't, or you accidentally made a mistake in leadership or whatever, you have to take radical ownership of that, because you're going to go from being their most influential and best person in their life to the biggest narcissist they've ever met that they tell stories about on a podcast in 20 years. So, which I do think podcasts will be around in 20 years. But I really just think that we need to really take radical accountability for the influence that we have on other people. And it's not our team's job to fulfill those emotional needs. And our Gen Z people are not just going to be, we're a lot of people pleasers in our millennial generation. We're just trying to get through the day. We've been through a hell of a lot. So realistically, like if I can regulate someone else's emotions, I'm going to do that. And I am working on it in therapy. But the Gen Z people are not going to do it. Just watch one episode of Love Island. They're not afraid. So I think it's such a beautiful thing to have an open culture like that. But it's really the work that you have to do on yourself to be open and accepting of the culture that people are naturally bringing you. Yeah. And there's a wide range of personalities in Gen Z too. So even though we are kind of putting them in a box in this discussion, the most powerful thing that you can do for your people is be a change manager and a change agent, and making sure that you're having one-on-one real honest discussions where they can be open with you about what they need. And then on the flip side of it, make sure you're drawing those boundaries, because it's real easy to hop on the roller coaster with them if you're not stepping into your leadership role and helping direct that energy to where it should be going. But you might have a Gen Z person that's never opened TikTok. So it's not always helpful to make assumptions, but no matter what, across the board, every single employee that you have, they want to be listened to, they want to be heard, and you have to want to be radically accountable to the leadership that you're providing, because whether you ask for it or not, which if you hired them, you're asking for it, then you have to show up in that way, because you made them a commitment and a promise when you decided to bring them onto your team.
Yeah, emotional safety and security for employees is essential. And so, like you said, taking radical ownership. It's not that you have to be perfect. It's not that they have to be perfect. And I see this in relationships in general. And that's why it's interesting, as I'm in the dating world, a lot of this stuff translates to running a team. It's that emotional regulation and owning your shit when you fuck up. Right. Like if I'll just use an example of one of our coaches. Her and her team member had kind of a conflict. They had a confrontation about something, and her team member started spouting off. Now they have they have a beautiful team culture. And so there is a lot of openness, and this team member started saying things that were not appropriate. It was sliding to more of a friend connection. And in the moment, the business owner stopped it and said, we've crossed a line. We're going to take a break and we're going to come back at this. Clearly our emotions are going, they're driving the conversation.
Mhm.
I have enough respect for you that I don't want to continue down this path. Let's meet tomorrow. So we put a pause, or she put a pause on it so that the emotion wasn't driving the conversation, because emotion will come down over time and logic will kick in. And then when she had the conversation the next day, she took ownership in her part of it, that her tact and her way of addressing it put the team member on the defense that she felt she could spell it off. And then because of the team culture and because the owner took responsibility and led by example, the team member then apologized for her part. She said, I totally overstepped, and she owned it, and they repaired the connection. And in
Mhm.
any relationship, whether it's employee, whether it's coworker, whether it's partner, whether it's family member, when you can own your stuff and you can repair the connection. The repair is more important than the perfection of never making a mistake and never having an issue, right?
Yeah.
It's that repair that really puts things fully to bed, that we're not building up resentment, or it's not like, well, screw her, I'm going to go look for another job and take all my clients and, do this behind her back because I want to get back at her in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there is, something that's really interesting about what you just said is we call it like the discipline and the recovery. So it's not
Mhm.
that discipline doesn't exist. It's that you are recentering things when you get back or when you need to get back. And it's not about having a script that works every single time, because there has been millions of conversations at this point that have gone one way with one employee and with the
Mhm.
other, a totally different direction with a different employee. I
Yep.
could do everything perfectly right in regards to management, and then that employee could be off and running and our next director. But then I could do the exact same thing with a different person, a different personality, and they could be reporting me to, they could be filing for unemployment and saying it was hostile work environment.
Yeah.
So it all comes back to compliance.
Yeah.
So I know that we are here to talk more about culture, but there are things you can do in your HR strategy that is going to drive the culture on
Yeah.
top of the mission, vision, and values that are going to really make sure that there is a, kind of like having to say that quiet thing out loud. Those can be entrenched in your policies so that they can actually act as the bad cop, and you can just show up and enforce that culture. And it becomes less about enforcing policies, but it becomes more about, let me explain why we have this policy and what behaviors it's supposed to help to,
Yeah.
exasperate or inhibit. And a lot of times it does come down to safety, making sure that your employees are safe, making sure that your company is safe, and making sure that you are safe as a leader to show up, run your business, and manage the team. And most people will understand that. It's sometimes just about taking that extra step to explain the why behind the what. And don't expect perfection every time, because your culture will weed out the people that are not down to help build that culture. Your
100%.
policies can weed them out. And even down to before you hire them, your job post can weed them out. So
Yep.
using that's what HR strategy is. It's utilizing the overall big picture to help take small actions to make sure that you don't have to fix things all the time. So that when you do have to discipline and correct, it's really going to have a big impact on the overall progression of the individual, and it's not going to have an impact on the company, because that's a stable and constant source of where you're getting your cultural ideals from. But the
Yeah.
person may have to tweak themselves a little bit to fit in there, and a lot of times it makes them better when they do it.
Yeah. I think it's so essential I think anybody who's had issues with team members and managing them, even if they think that they manage them well, it's because you got the wrong people on the boat, right? It's so much easier. We see this a lot when people, if they've hired before getting into our program and following our very specific hiring processes, on the mission and vision values, like you talked about, because if you hire people without weeding them out long before they've ever, clocked in for the first time, you have such an easier time managing a team that's, like you said, intrinsically motivated based on where you're taking the company. Otherwise, you're going to be dragging dead weight along who wants to go in their own direction or who doesn't know the direction. And so it can make a world of difference. If you're listening to this and you've hired before and it blew up in your face and was an awful experience, there are fixes to it. It's not just hiring in general is going to get that result every time. There are specific things that you can do and adjust and test out to get amazing team members on board. And then it just becomes a pure joy to watch them thrive in the environment you're creating. And your role really is, it's interesting because I think leadership really is more supporting them to thrive as opposed to you being the one that's, hold on, scotch. Leadership is really supporting them to thrive and creating the environment for them to thrive and supporting them, rather than it is you're the leader and they're following you and they have to do everything that you say, because that becomes more of a dictatorship. But when
Hmm.
you can create that environment for them to thrive, then everybody wins.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's really no better, honestly, way to end it,
Yeah.
because I know we're getting close to time and I want to be respectful of that, but I just feel like this episode was so much fun to record, especially because there is a lot of tactical things that go into building the culture, but there is not a lot of educators that are on the same page. A lot of times people don't understand that the profit margin isn't just bring the person in, pay them 30% of what the service costs, then send them on their way. And that's strategy. No, that's just math. Like there is more, the bigger picture is going to come down to strategy and like real depth of education, which is what you're providing. There's a million other little pieces along the way, but I just have to say it's so refreshing to talk to somebody that's actually prioritizing the right things, because we've helped people dig themselves out of holes in business. And, I think it's just really cool that you are able to do this for the beauty pros, because we kind of talked before this, and my biggest experience with beauty pros besides our clients is my friends. And I can often see the forest through the trees in their own experiences in their careers. And so they're some of the most creative, kind, and like talented people I know. So to know that their employer is losing out on something because they're creating this bad environment or whatever the case may be, like, it just sucks. Like, we really do have a responsibility to make sure that we're letting people have their talents show, and it will come back to you in spades, and it will come back in your business. So I just have to commend you for what you're teaching.
Oh, well, I love that we resonate so much. And I'm sorry it took us a year and a half. I think Kira reached out to me, or I reached out to her. We somehow became aware of each other like a year and a half, 2 years ago. And the timing of this was epic. And I'm not done with you. You'll see more Kira around on the Lashpreneur. I got to figure out how, but you're amazing. You're wonderful. Let people know where they can learn more about you and the Paradigm.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, Paradigm is my consulting company. We also have a podcast called On the Up and Up. So you can kind of pick and choose episodes that might be really relevant to your team stuff, compliance, whatever it is that you're looking for. But I think one of the things that your audience is really going to resonate with is our quiz. So I'm not sure if I shared it, but I'll make sure you get it. So it's on our website, theparadigm.com/quiz, and it is going to spit out your leadership archetype. So what it's going to do is give you a 3-page PDF on some of your strengths and some of your weaknesses. And one of the things that I really love about that is that when people can tell me what their archetype is, then I can give them really specific advice, because these leadership relationships are not just about what your employee is getting from the situation, but it's also about how you can use your strengths to make sure that you're showing up in a specific way. And that's why scripts and stuff like that don't work when it comes to building up your team. You are a different person than everyone else, and so is your employee. So that's why HR will always have a job, because we've got so many personalities to deal with. But then also Instagram is really fun too. So I'd love to connect with your audience on there. They can shoot me voice memos, just let me know what's going on in the business. If nothing else, and I won't use your name, it is a content farm. So tell me all of your dramas with your team, because that will help me figure out how to teach about it. But yeah, it was great to be here. And I think Instagram's the most fun, but the quiz, I think everybody's going to take that and run with it, especially if this episode resonated.
Yeah, we'll definitely link all of that up in the show notes, and I'll make sure I get the right information from Kira afterwards. So everyone, have a good one. Thanks again, Kira.
Thank you.